Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Sound Transit's park and ride garages are popular, especially during the morning rush. Many reach at least 90% capacity every weekday. Now the agency is trying to control the rush by implementing paid parking for some garages with plans to expand. Seattle Times transportation reporter Nick DeShais will tell us more about Sound Transit's plans and what it says about our light rail system in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. This week, Washington became the first state to make the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline available to people who are incarcerated in state prisons. State officials say suicide is one of the top causes of unexpected deaths in state prisons. The new policy will allow people to call 988 from phones and tablets in every state facility. Corrections officials say the lifeline is meant to enhance mental health services that already exist and not replace them. The World Cup is a little more than 1 month away, and today elected leaders will outline transit plans for match days this summer. Governor Bob Ferguson, Mayor Katie Wilson, and transportation leaders will give public remarks at 12:30 this afternoon at Lumen Field. The media event is being dubbed Know Before You Go. It will also be streamed live on TVW. Every match in Seattle is happening on a weekday. The first one is Monday, June 15th. The last one is July 6th. And speaking of transportation, here's a reminder. All northbound lanes on the State Route 99 First Avenue South Bridge are closing nightly this week, beginning at 10. They'll reopen each morning at 5. Crews are replacing the steel bridge deck. Lanes will be back open this weekend, but then the same nightly closure schedule will happen next week as well. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. As the region's light rail system expands, so does the number of park and ride garages. But it's never enough. If you've ever tried to get a spot during the morning commute, you know you need to have a plan in place if you really need one. Sound Transit made a radical change to try and curb the chaos, adding paid parking permits for a few garages north of Seattle, with more on the way. Seattle Times transportation reporter Nick DeShais is here to tell us more about these permits and how people are reacting. Nick, good to see you.
Same to you. Pleasure to be back.
Thanks for coming in. So the last time we spoke was when the light rail stretched down south to Federal Way, and you mentioned in that episode how they were putting parking all the way up and down the line. So let's talk about what's new first.
Yeah, well, I mean, the newest thing is what we're here to talk about. They brought paid parking to a few of the garages. Now, there's garages up and down the line, east side, north, south, all the ways. But these are just coming to the north end. So it's basically the stations that were added almost 2 years ago now. We're talking Northgate and up. So Northgate's been around a while, but that was the end of the line. So now it's Northgate, the 2 and Shoreline. We have Mount Lake Terrace and Linwood. Now, all of those are at capacity, but only the 2 and Shoreline and Northgate are charging for parking. And so it's a matter really of who owns those garages at this point. There's a little ownership issue between those in Linwood and in Mount Lake Terrace. They're at 100% capacity, just as the other ones are. But the first ones coming online are Shoreline and Northgate.
Okay, and we can talk about the revenue from those garages and where that might go later. But before we do, let's break down the numbers for listeners. What is this going to cost daily commuters?
For a daily pass, it's $6, or you can buy a monthly pass for $60. So if you pay every day, that's, twice as much or even more than that. So it's not a huge amount of money, but there's also the vast majority of the spots in these parking garages will remain free. And so it's that kind of balance I think people want to do of like, do I pay $6 or do I try my luck on finding a free spot?
What is the percentage breakdown free to paid at this point?
Right now, it's pretty small. It's about 5 to 10% of the space in there, of the spots in each of those 3 garages. The policy allows them to go up to a quarter of spots, but they're starting small now. And, I talked to Sound Transit. I talked to David Jackson at Sound Transit, and he said they're starting small just to see how it goes. The 2 garages in Shoreline, he told me they were subscribed within a week. And so those are really, people really wanted to get those permits there.
Okay. So there is some demand. It does feel like a big step. People don't like it when you add a price tag to something that used to at least feel free. What went into this choice for Sound Transit?
Well, as Jackson told me, it's been a long and winding road. I mean, it's been in the works for years. I mean, before the pandemic hit, they wanted to bring charging to some of the garages, the ones that normally get filled up really quickly. Of course, COVID hit, that cratered public transit across the country, so they kind of pulled back on the plan. So it's been coming for a while. But the idea is to kind of manage this parking. And if you look into kind of policy and how to manage parking, it's always, the free parking is filled up very quickly. They want to put a price on just a small sliver of it to get those spots kind of the people who have the biggest need or can afford it, get those spots. The rest will try their luck, or they're also hoping the few that always tried their luck in the morning to get there 7 a.m. or whatever, 7:30 a.m., very early in the morning. They'll just say, it's not worth it. There's, 5 to 10% of these are now being paid for. The rest are still free and being taken. I might just try to take the bus to the light rail or something like that.
I read that comment from David Jackson, and I thought, this is also trying to manage customers and commuters as well to encourage them to use other ways.
That's true. And that's, Sound Transit is not shy about that. They want people to take transit to transit, basically take the bus to light rail or however way it works. I mean, that's what they want to do. They don't really want to be in the parking garage business. When I talked to David, he said it's an amenity that our partner jurisdictions want. So it's not something they really want to be doing, but they understand it's necessary for a lot of people who want to take light rail.
What do park and ride numbers reveal about transit ridership?
I'm not sure there's a great relationship there. I mean, if you look at a parking garage that's totally full, we'll look at Linwood, which is the biggest one or one of the biggest ones in the system. It's something like 1,800 spots. You look at that compared to the daily boardings at these stations, it's just a sliver of that. There's thousands and thousands of people getting on at these stations. So even if the light rail garage is totally full, it's not going to translate to full trains. And that's why they want people to get there via different ways, either biking, walking. I know that's not available for a lot of people. Taking a bus there, maybe that's not available. They're really trying to work on this first and last mile idea.
A lot of people fall into that category there. Could we see other park and rides in the Seattle area move to paid permits or more parking become paid only? You mentioned this is the start of a larger plan. Yeah,
this is the start. And like I said, Linwood and Mount Lake Terrace are full. They want to bring paid parking there. They just need the WSDOT, the State Department of Transportation, owns part of it or some of it. So they're trying to work through ownership issues there. But yeah, I would expect this to come to all the stations as more and more people use them and light rail gets more popular. You're already looking at Tukwila, Angle Lake, Redmond Technology Center. They're really close to 100% capacity. They're over 90%, which is the policy for Sound Transit. Like once they are normally hitting 90% capacity, they want to bring this parking in. And so what Sound Transit told me is every 3 months, they're kind of going to re-examine the situation and see if more garages have it. And there's garages up and down the east side and, all over. So basically not in the city of Seattle. Everywhere else they have garages.
Right. Sure. Exactly. You spoke to some commuters for this story, Nick. What did they tell you? Are they willing to pay to park?
Nobody did. Nobody wants to pay to park. I was only out there one morning. I went to all the stations on the north side. I couldn't find one person who was like, this is a great idea, that we need to kind of figure this out. Everybody had their own issues. Like one person said, taxpayer dollars already paid for these garages. Why are we paying for them again? Another person I talked to said he paid $250 a month to pay for parking at his residence. He lives in a condo. He didn't want to pay another $60.
Wow.
Another person I talked to, he said it's kind of a calculation for him. If you do the calculation, it's $3 one way on the train. So that's $6 to go there and back.
Yeah.
$6 for parking at the garage. So his calculation is if he can find a spot and pay less than $12 in Seattle where he's going, he's going to opt for that just for the convenience of having the car with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in my mind, I would pay $10 to park in the garage at KUOW. So if I'm going to pay $10 a day to park, I'm just going to drive right to my office and slide into that spot and pay $10 for that.
And I think a lot of people are doing that kind of calculus, which, I think Sound Transit, they're trying to thread the needle a little bit, like how much can they pay to kind of keep the churn at these parking garages happening, keep people moving and keeping some spaces open for people who have the most need. Maybe somebody they normally don't take light rail or they normally don't park, but they have an appointment earlier in that day or they have a doctor's appointment to get to or something. They're just trying to reserve these spots for people who have the biggest need. Again, people are grabbing them up as quick as they can. So I don't know if it's working out that way.
Yeah. Does this speak, Nick, to the popularity of light rail or more about the difficulty of the first last mile commute for people?
Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, light rail expanded a bunch over the last few years. It's going a lot of places now. So I think a lot of people are trying it out, and it is very popular. It gets you out of traffic in a lot of ways. But getting to those stations can be difficult for a lot of people. This first last mile idea is just connecting to transit from either your origin or destination. And in Seattle, I think it's fairly easy in King County, especially we got a pretty good metro system. But once you get out in kind of the rural stretches, north in Snohomish County and even the eastern part of the metro region, people live miles from these stations and they got to get there some way. And maybe the bus isn't very convenient. I know there's not the shareable scooters like we have in Seattle. Those aren't everywhere. Places like Redmond and Bellevue, they have these kind of shuttle services that you can get an app for. And they'll, it's called Red Link and Bellhop. They'll bring you to the station. Not all places have that. Thinking of Mercer Island, they got a new station. When I wrote about that, a lot of people called me saying, hey, I'm a senior at home and I cannot get to that station without driving, and there's just not enough spots there. And so there's this difficulty that they need to work on, getting people to these stations. And I think building bigger and bigger parking garages isn't the most cost-effective way. And, they're always going to fill up, probably.
Likely. You mentioned earlier that Sound Transit isn't trying to get into the parking garage business. Does parking revenue help Sound Transit with its budget problems? Where does this money go?
I did talk to David Jackson about that, and he said they're not making money on this. It's basically going in to manage the program, making sure these permits are processed and making sure people aren't parking illegally.
So just the overhead.
Just the overhead, basically. And if you look at the budget of Sound Transit, it's a lot of money, and, $6 a day isn't going to really do much to it. So, yeah.
All right, well, what are you looking for as the program continues?
As a transportation reporter, I hear from a lot of people about how they couldn't find a spot here or there. And so, when Linwood opened in August of 2024, within a month, it was full and people were parking illegally outside the station. They said it was at 105% capacity, which sounds impossible until you realize that people are just parking where they shouldn't be. If they can kind of get a handle on that and maybe people do start taking the bus to the train, I think that's a sign of success. Or if people have an emergency and they can still find a spot at one of these garages, that's a good sign of its success. When I look at these garages, I think about business core parking policy or philosophy. What they want to do is they want people to be able to find a spot. If they're not in a rush, maybe they'll park a block or two away. But if they really need to run in and grab something, the idea is there's always that spot there. Maybe it's a premium. Maybe it costs more money than the other ones. But that's kind of the thinking nowadays. So if there's a situation where somebody really needs a spot and they can find one in the garage at any time of day, I think that's a sign of success. I should say also, this permit parking, it's only from 4 to 10 a.m. on weekdays. It's free on the weekends. It's free after 10 a.m. It's free on holidays. So it's really only that morning rush and where they're really kind of concerned about this management of available parking spots.
Commuters under pressure, Nick.
Yes, getting to work or where else we need to go every day.
As somebody who covers transit in our region, what could this shift mean for commuters? As these permits get gobbled up, could Sound Transit consider more measures?
The policy right now is reserving a quarter of these spots at the most. I think that's the only growth we'll see. Of course, the board could come and say, no, it's 100% now, but I don't think they're going to do that because there is that idea of, hey, we already paid for these garages to build them and they shouldn't be making a profit off of us.
Nick DeShais covers transportation for the Seattle Times. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for your support. There's tons of free parking over here if you want to pull in and take a minute to rate or review our podcast. Hey, even share it with a friend. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.